Well, again, this week, the Senate Appropriations Committee was busy listening to different budgets brought to us from the different agencies within government. One that we listened to just this morning dealt with the supplemental budget. And there are various supplemental budgets, and this one I think is very, very important. This is operating. So this is looking at budgeted expenses, budgeted income compared to where we're at now in March of this year, trying to match up what's reality compared to what we were doing our best guess last year. So those things were put in front of us. Sometimes folks that some state agency needs a couple more dollars. Sometimes it is, oh, we budgeted too much. We're not going to need to spend that, and it goes the other way. And of course, that also happens sometime on the income side. Public debt, we listened to that, and I think this is maybe third year. That's so fast because we hold virtually no public debt in our state that goes through that budget. Office of Administration we're in and did a very good job of providing an Office of Administration. That's the true gatekeeper of funds and how state government works. Their director, commissioner of administration come in, made a presentation. We went through those budgets, and you get to hear a myriad of different state agencies bringing their information there. Employee benefits, which is very important. Of course, the majority of that goes both with health care for state employees as well as our retirement system that helps the state employees. So that budget is always interesting to listen to and what some outlooks are there. Statewide real estate, and that is improvement statewide real estate, possibly adding renting of statewide real estate, possibly giving some back. So we always gain some knowledge when we go through that. When the reappropriation budget comes before the Appropriations Committee, those are projects that have been appropriated in previous years. Some funds maybe got spent, sometimes no funds got spent, sometimes all the funds got spent. And we're looking at each one of those projects and see where they're at in the process. So that's why we call it reappropriations. Rarely would there be a new appropriations put in that budget, almost never. It would be looking at trying to finish up projects and where they're at in their budget. Maintenance and repairs, exactly what it sounds like, and that's primarily for state facilities. You could probably go a little out of what I've said, but pretty well we're talking about state facilities. Construction and renovation, exactly what it's talking about. That's construction and renovation to state properties, and those properties can be managed by entities within the state. For example, corrections. We'll see the projects that they have in that budget to do there. So it's not only the buildings that the state of Missouri, as far as the Office of Administration deals with, but it is all areas of our budget or all areas of state government. American Rescue Plan Act, that's been called ARPA for now years. So people have been hearing about that. That primarily deals with funds that were sent out from the federal government to work to help states do what was concerning about COVID and the fact that maybe we were going to really see a shutdown, and of course in our state and other states, and the income was going to be a major problem. Of course, I believe our state stayed relatively open, and if you really follow along in the budget, we had really good budget numbers. Our state made the decision with these ARPA funds to fund one-time projects that hopefully help reduce possible expenses in the future, or be able to do transformative is the fancy word. Somebody like me probably doesn't know what that means maybe, but transformative projects in our state. And those projects hopefully don't cause us to have additional expenses in forward. I think we're getting real close to being at the end of that. I think most of that money has to be out the door by the end of 2026, which if I remember the date, it's December 31st. I may be a little bit off of my time, but we're getting to the point where those funds are reducing. They're getting out the door, and the funds that are not getting spent in that area, sometimes we're shifting them somewhere else in the state to be able to spend those dollars. The Secretary of State, of course, come in, provided us an overview of that budget. Department of Commerce and Insurance, that's a budget with virtually zero general revenue in it. That part of government is pretty well funded by fees, et cetera, that are charged to those agencies within inside there. Now, I don't want you to think we don't pay for that, because when you pay your insurance bill, of course, the insurance company's paying that fee, and you and I are still paying it, but we're not paying it with general revenue taxes. Department of Mental Health, of course, it's a budget that I've become more and more aware of and work with Department of Mental Health on various things, and I don't know whether I'll ever know even a third of what goes on with mental health. There's so many things out there, and we are constantly learning in our office over and over again where Department of Mental Health touch our lives. Final couple things I want to discuss. We have a couple policy bills that we've been working on. One of those bills is Senate Bill 899. It deals, I'm going to use the word daycare, but it's also primarily based or focused on students that are 5 years and older. So when we do that, I want to make sure we're not talking about infants and toddlers. This bill focuses around licensing with those kids that are 5 years and up. And what I hope this will do, and I've been working with agencies that provide these kind of services to the public, after school clubs, those after school clubs could be run by YMCA, schools, nonprofits, et cetera, et cetera. And there were some things on licensing that they wanted to make those licensing not cause kids to not be safe, but some of the rules, because it was also tied to earlier when I talked about infants and toddlers, those rules didn't seem like that they ought to be the same for a 10-year-old that's for a 2-month-old. So what we're doing is drawing a line in between there and relaxing, I'm going to say, a few of the rules and regulations will make it much easier on these providers to be able to provide the care that we need for this age student. It's very age appropriate, and we hope that it also helps with being able to expand some physical space, because in this group, you're still licensed. So somebody has to come in and say, okay, you can have 10 kids, you can have 2 kids, you can have 102 kids. And that physical space, we're also touching that to make it clearer on what constitutes safe, unsafe within that spacing requirement. So we hope that's helpful. And the last one of these bills, also something dealing with child care. And this is a smaller population of our state for sure. These are the medically complex children that are under 6 years of age. So these children require, I'm going to say, pretty well we can look at one-on-one nursing care to be able to take care of them. Their parents have to have somebody very qualified to be able to watch them. They can't take their children to any kind of daycare and just be able to let them off and be able to know that they're going to feel safe. Well, the Department of Health and Senior Services have had so much trouble, and these parents have, trying to find one-on-one nurses is normally what it takes to be able to do this. We can't find enough of those. So the idea had been brought to DHSS, Department of Health and Senior Services. Why don't we look at some of the daycare providers that might be willing to take 2, 3, 4 of these young people and put them into their centers and then hire maybe one nurse. And one nurse could watch more than one of these medically complex kids. And that way families could get a little more use out of a nurse and provide that care. And of course, Department of Health Senior Services have worked with, I believe, all the stakeholders in this to make sure that they understand it. At this point in time, there probably won't be too terrible much cost at the very beginning, because again, these providers are going to have to go through a licensure process to do that. But even after that happens, DHSS has put in front of me the maximum cost they might have is $130,000. Well, if we can provide this kind of care for these parents and these kids, I think it's sure worth us looking and maybe passing this policy to let that be an option.